Ginsburg. Hey, y'all. Welcome, Nick, to my channel.
Thanks. Hi. So I'm so excited. I love talking to you. So I'm so excited that we get to do this.
I can't even tell you how long Nick and I have been chatting about coming onto the channel and doing really fun stuff. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We are going to geek out today on hashtag all of the things. So before we do, I just want, if you have never connected with Nick before, will you put in the chat 1? If you have, hit 2. I would love to see who needs to get introduced to Nick, because let me tell you, you guys are going to absolutely adore him. So I'm going to actually let Nick share with us like a little bit about who you are, your awesome accent that I absolutely could listen to forever. So tell us about where you are and what you're doing and hashtag all of the things.
Okay, perfect. Also, I actually really love seeing some ones in the chat because that's very exciting. I love connecting with new people. So I'm Nick. I live in Melbourne, Australia. So it is currently 8 a.m. On Friday morning. So I'm talking to you from the future. And for most of you, the future. So I'm the executive assistant to the provost and senior vice president of Monash University, which is Australia's largest university, and the provost is the chief academic officer of sorts. So all of the faculties report into my boss. She has about 6,500 staff that report into her, so it's a really big role, and that's my day job. I love it. It takes up a good portion of my time. But outside of that, I do a lot of things. So I'm also studying my Bachelor of Psychology. So I'm doing that part-time, which I really love. Super passionate about mental well-being. And mental well-being and mental health is sort of it underpins everything else that I do. So I'm a keynote speaker. I do lots of conferences and sessions like this and podcasts and you name it to talk about productivity, self-care, authenticity. I talk a lot about my own journey. So I grew up surrounded sort of by a lot of trauma and sort of tumultuous experiences. So I talk a lot about that and overcoming that. And then outside of that, I'm a massive EA advocate. I love our community. I love our profession. I started in 2020, the Admin Collective, which is a judgment-free, safe community for admins worldwide. And in June this year, I got it to a point where I was able to sell that community to the incredible Candice Birmingham, who is a superstar. She runs Admin Avenues here in Australia, and she's just one of the kindest, funniest people that I know. And I knew that it was time for the community to grow much larger than what I could with my very limited time with everything else that I do. But that's me in a nutshell. And I'm most active on Instagram. So if you haven't connected with me, jump on Instagram. It's nice and easy, Nick Ginsburg, or LinkedIn. I am on there as well, but I'm very bad at posting. I'm so sorry. I try.
You're being so sweet about, like, seriously, anybody who can build an admin organization and then be like, you know what, like, I love it, but I need it to grow bigger than me. And then, come on now, Nick. I think you're the person to do that. Like, that's so incredible. Okay, so I have a question for you that I know we're going to geek out on. Literally hashtag all of the things. So if you are joining us, please hit up all the questions because you know us, nothing is off the table. What is your favorite tech right now? Like, what is like your favorite thing that you're doing right this second?
Okay, so I know this is kind of like a hot topic and everyone's talking about it, but I really love ChatGPT, but in particular, the iPhone app. I really, really, really love it. If you don't have the iPhone app for ChatGPT, you have to get it. It just makes using it so much easier. So when I'm at my desk at work, I'm more likely to pick up my phone and type it into the app, a question that I've got, rather than locate the website and pull it up and then chat. So I'm fully into that at the minute. Like, I fully geeked out into it.
You know, the thing that I love about it is okay, so if you guys ever know this about me, I am a horrible texter. It takes me forever. My daughter, who's like 28, she's like, really, mom? I mean, I swear she goes like 120 miles a minute on that thing. And I'm over here like, so I actually love the speech to text in the mobile app. I love it. I can just like pop it on and just like do a word vomit on hashtag all the things. Okay. So we're going to talk more about tech later, but I have a question for you because we were talking about this and it was like such a spicy session. And I was like, oh, we 100% have to talk about it. What are your thoughts around the concept about being chaos coordinator as an administrative professional? And I think this is really interesting because Katie, who is joining us, is actually in education. And there's a lot of people out there that I've met that are EAs in education. And I love it that here you are, someone who's like crushing it in the role and you have a really unique perspective. So talk to us about chaos coordination in our role as an administrative professional.
Yeah. And so just before we dive into this, I will just make it very clear that these are just my thoughts around this topic. So that disclaimer probably gives you an idea as to what I'm about to say. So chaos tamer, chaos coordinator, I'm not a fan of that title that people will use. I think it sheds the wrong light on us. There is a period when you start a new job where, yeah, sure, it's chaotic, right? But then after that, as a good assistant, you should be able to actually have that under wraps and have processes in place and have relationships built so that it isn't chaos. So I've worked, and I want to be clear about this though, because I understand there'll be people watching going, but my office is chaotic and I'm trying hard to wrangle it, right? And I get that, okay? I've worked for a couple of bosses who were incredibly chaotic. Like you know those like whirlwind people that just they just run through an office and then everything just gets sucked into the vortex. And then all of a sudden you're going, where am I? What happened? I don't know what's going on. So so those people are always going to exist. You're always going to have people like that you will end up supporting. However, it is our job to buffer that. And we should never be talking about our role, our office, our organization as chaotic. Is my view. I work in a very hierarchical institution, and higher education around the world is generally pretty hierarchical. And so you want to make sure that you are giving the best impression. Also, I don't think it gives us the props that we need to get, because those people that are saying that they're chaos tamers and chaos coordinators are actually probably doing a phenomenal job, and it's downplaying that because that word chaos is still in there.
Yeah, I love that. You said something that I thought was really interesting recently when we were talking. And one of the things that you had mentioned is getting ahead of the wave and being so proactive that you are actually so far ahead of it so that when it hits you, that chaos hits you, you're like, I'm already here and there's space. Can you talk about how do you actively do that? And like, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, huge. This is my favorite thing. So staying ahead of the wave is so critically important. I think a lot of people in the admin profession believe that our roles are just completely reactive, and they're not. You don't have to be totally reactive. There are definitely things that will pop up that are reactive that you do need to sort of action as they're hitting you. But the vast majority of things you can plan. So for me, staying ahead of the wave is the core reason why I'm able to be good at my job. And how I do that is by time management, time blocking. I do hours of power. So every morning from 8 to 9, I'm locked away. I'm not answering the call unless it's a call coming in from someone that can fire me, right? I'm not doing anything other then actioning my emails in my hour of power. That is what I've chosen to do because I get a lot of emails, as we all do. I'm not saying that I get more than others because I know there are people that have way more than me. But for me, I can come in the morning and have 60 actionable emails. I want to make sure that they are done in that first hour so that I'm actioning stuff throughout the day. And when things are thrown at me from all different angles, I'm able to pick it up quickly and run with it. So there's no kind of like panic in my day.
Yeah.
That is critical because if you don't have, if you remove that panic from your day, first of all, your sort of self-worth skyrockets. You are much calmer. You're able to action things with a clearer head. You can build better relationships, but also you get rid of that chaos. And so that has been something, sorry, I know I'm going on, but that's something that I told you we could talk for hours, but that's something that for me that is just so critically important. I have to have that being proactive and staying ahead of what's going to hit me is key.
When did you like first recognize or first kind of go, wait a minute, I've got to put some different processes in place for myself so that I'm not being overtaken by the chaos that other people are wanting to bring? Did you have some sort of an epiphany or some situation that made you really?
And I felt like without a lot of thought, I'd managed to do it for a good portion of my career, just kind of willy-nilly, you know, like, which isn't a very Australian saying. So as soon as that came out of my mouth, I realized that it was so Australian. But it's something that I just did without thought. And then I got a role with someone around the time that I was getting married, and he is an executive that I adore. Like I no longer work with him, but he's just the sweetest man. But he's the first that will tell you that he is chaotic, right? And the first few months that I was with him, I got married to my husband and I had my honeymoon. And which was not great timing, can I just say, starting a new job with someone that was self-confessed chaotic was not the smartest move by me. But it was that moment where I went, I need to change up how I'm doing things. I need to be more proactive with my own self. So I need to start putting different stuff in place to make sure that I can stay ahead of this. And that's really when I implemented like really strict time management and productivity practices. So for me, it was time blocking in the hour of power. So he would get in at sort of 7:00 in the morning. I'd get in at about 7:30. I'd give him that half an hour to download to me. And we would never take half an hour. It was like 5 minutes. But we had that time where he knew he could get me. But then he knew from 8 to 9, I'm out. I'd put him into a meeting for that time. or I would go get him breakfast and then shut his door and say, Mark, I'm just going to work. And that's what I would do. And so that hour of power was so critically important for me to get in front of the wave with him. And it worked brilliantly. We worked really well together. One of the first things he said to me when we started working, he's like, I'm really hard to manage and I'm really sorry. And I was like, that's okay. Just leave it with me. We'll see how we go. And at the end, he said, I need you to, so he moved to be the president of the University of Rhode Island in the States. And I was dealing with his office when he was moving. And he said, you've got to tell them that I can be quite difficult. And I was like, Mark, you're not difficult at all. You just have to have certain things in place. And so I worked with them. But yes, he's a dream. But yes, that was the wake up moment where I went, I need to be more intentional with this to save my own sanity.
Don't you think it's interesting how some executives can feel like I'm just really difficult. It's hard to work with me. But on the same hand, sometimes you have to think through like, but what's broken? Why are you feeling that way? What do you feel is broken around it, and how can we fix it? And then implementing some of those best practices, which I think is absolutely amazing. So when you sit down and you're doing your hour of power, do you get out of your inbox for the rest of the day? What does that look like for you?
I don't. And I know that there's a lot of productivity gurus that will slap me silly over saying that I don't get out of my inbox. Yeah, I know. I was waiting for it, Melissa. Don't worry. I was waiting for it. But I always think that productivity practices need to suit how you work. So for me, the hour of power is for me to action everything I need to action, right? All the stuff that is sitting in my inbox that has come in from 4 o'clock the day before, right? And I need to get it clear. So when I tell you I get down to nothing, I get down to nothing. I'm on annual leave today. I have nothing in my inbox at the minute. And it's 8:15 in the morning. I get rid of it. I make sure it's done. I did that yesterday afternoon. I have an out of office on. But that hour of power is so critical for the emails that the emails then don't become a stressor for me throughout the day. Right?
Yeah.
So because they're clear at the beginning, I'm not thinking about my inbox. Like, I'm really not throughout my day. What I'm thinking about is, what's this meeting? That conversation in the corridor, I'm almost certain that's going to be a big meeting that I'm going to have to put in tomorrow, and I don't know where. That's where my brain is throughout the day. And so I am in my inbox. We also use, so at Monash, we use Google, so the Google Suite. And so people use Google Hangouts, like the Google Chat, all the time. So it forces you into your inbox. So you've constantly got it open. You've constantly got the chats open. But it works well for me. And so I will say, as a disclaimer, every single person that talks about productivity will talk about it slightly differently. Yeah. So Melissa and I both talk about productivity. And I think we both have a lot of stuff that we agree on that's core, but there's some other stuff that we talk about very differently. And what everyone's job is to pick and choose what works for them. So there'll be stuff that I talk about that may resonate with you, and then there'll be a whole bunch of stuff that may not resonate with you. So you need to figure out what works well, what's going to work well in your organization, in your office, and implement it to make sure that you're doing the best thing that you can for yourself.
One of the things that I'm always telling people is that productivity strategies are going to work differently for every single person. And if you've been doing something a very specific way for, however many years, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and simply do something different. What can you build on, like, in a natural way? I always tell people, if I could just wake up tomorrow and do all the things, I would be at my goal weight. Like, seriously, like, I would never, we could all just wake up and do all the things, we wouldn't have these issues, right? And so when you're building a productivity plan, it is about understanding how you work, but it's also part of the self-discovery, in my mind, is also really looking at what is broken, what is not working for me, and then creating the processes to fix that, to like cover those gaps. And I do think it's interesting because the higher up that you get in your career, and I'm not saying that you have to support an executive, you can support an organization or a team and be crushing it in your career and be exactly where you want to be. But whatever it is that you're doing, you do have to put more processes in place and really think about, how am I showing up just like my executive business partner? How would I want them to show up? Am I showing up in that same way? So what are some other things that are not email that you do to be the most productive?
Yeah, I will answer that, but I do just want to say a thing that's really important, and this is what you were just talking about, that I think is a really important topic to kind of highlight. All of our brains work differently. Yeah. So that then means that we operate differently at work. So whilst there may be 100,000 of us that have the same job title working for the same rough sort of senior level people, right? We will all do the job very differently. How we process information also can be quite different from each other. So how Melissa and I will interpret a job task will be totally different, right? So that is why it's so important to figure out how you work, what's going to work for you in that role, and then start implementing it bit by bit. Also, just to touch on what you were saying, Melissa, it takes time to build a habit.
Yes.
So you really have to like dig deep and keep going and force it and force it and force it until you start getting to a point where it is a natural thing. So one of the things that I do around sort of time blocking, which is critical for me. So I do really big, high level umbrella time blocking. So, for example, I will never do like really detailed tasks. So and when I say that, I mean it'll be something like future planning the calendar will be the umbrella task, and then I will pick within that what I'm going to focus on for that next 25 minutes, right?
Yep.
But to build that habit, I had to physically put it in the diary constantly. So I would manually block myself out time, right? Now, I don't do that.
Yeah.
So because it is such a habit, I time block up here, which is hilarious because there's not a lot else happening up there. So you kind of, once you've got that habit, you're able to do it. But there will be times where it slips and you need to revert back to rebuilding that habit. So that's an important sort of factor to make. But outside of the hour of power and emails, it really is sort of time blocking and time management that are really critical for me, especially studying and working and doing the stuff that I do. If I don't future plan and really look at what's coming up, when do I need stuff, and then backtrack all of that. So reverse engineer that sort of due date, I'm lost. Like I will fall flat on my face, right? I'm in the middle of semester 2 of uni. And so I've got 3 massive assignments due in the next 6 weeks. I work full time. Like I have to map those out. Like fully have to map it down to the minute detail to really make sure that I'm able to achieve it and that it doesn't impact my work. So that is probably the biggest thing for me. And I also think, and this is something that I talk about a lot, we are so quick to manage the time and to time block for our executives, but we don't do it for ourselves. And I don't understand why. If we are not in the right space to be able to support them, how can they be working in the right space? So what you implement for your executive, you need to implement for yourself. And I have heard people, and you and I have had this conversation with them, where people have said that they don't feel like they are worth putting the same sort of processes on them. And that is complete rubbish. So we are just as valuable in the office, and it is critical that we do that. Like we have to.
One of the things that I think, because I have heard the same thing, and I know that it's something that you and I have chatted about in the past, that I think it's really challenging for us, because one of the trends that we're seeing is a lot of assistants we're just getting a ton of executives, right? People still don't know what to do with us. So they're like, you know what? Let's just give you 5 and 6 executives. It'll be fine. And meanwhile, you're drowning and life is crazy and, all of the things. But what I constantly am hearing is that, because what goes along with that stuff is boundaries, setting expectations, direct communication, things that historically as women, we have really been pushed and basically told not to do any of those things. So I think it's really interesting, because when I hear a male executive talk about setting boundaries and the comfortability and the easiness of it, I love to get that perspective to share with women that are administrative professionals who really struggle with that sort of finding that worth and setting the boundaries. When you were coming into the field, did you struggle with that? Should I be let in the room? What if I set boundaries? What will people think? Like, how did that, and have you seen your counterparts that are female struggle with that? And what are your thoughts looking at from the outside in?
Yeah, I love this question.
We like to get spicy here, Nick. Come on.
Yeah. I love this question. So I was raised by, so I have 2 mums. So I was raised by 2 women. So I was in a very female-dominated household. And so what that has meant is that the environment growing up for me was obviously very feminine. So when I hit the workforce, yes, I did actually struggle with a lot of that stuff. Not as much as women, and I want to be very clear about that. But I definitely felt it. So I used to get so scared of speaking in public which is ironic.
Look at you now.
Yeah, but like if I was to talk in a team meeting, first of all, I'd go like purple, and then I would physically shake through my neck. So my voice would shake. You'd actually see my neck shaking, like it was a full body experience, right?
Yeah.
And that I really struggled with that. And that then flowed on to having difficult conversations and setting boundaries. I found that really difficult. But as I got more confident in the role, those conversations became easier for me. And this is, I think, where being a white man, I have a lot of privilege in this space where I don't feel like I'm going to be punished, which is horrendous, but I don't feel like I would be punished if I spoke out about boundaries. Whereas I know that isn't a real world feeling for the vast majority of other people in our profession. And so I'm well aware of that. And so I think what it comes down to, so there's a set of stereotypes that happen within our society, and it goes for any type of mixture of person that you've got. So white women, white men, anyone that's a person of color, any black people, there's so many different stereotypes, right? Everyone is constantly fighting against that. Yeah. And so you need to figure out the way where you are going to have the most impact in that conversation whilst also actively fighting that. Yeah. And so for me, one of the things that I knew that going into one of my EA roles, there was someone that was working before me it was a lady who was, I would say, in her mid-50s, just so eager and to please and to get the work done, which is lovely. But it meant she was doing 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Oh, wow.
Monday to Friday. And I applied for the role knowing that was her hours. And when I met with the executive and they said, you're the preferred candidate, we want you to start. When can you start? And I said, well, before I say yes, we need to have a talk about the hours, because I'm not someone that is going to do those hours. I mean, there is a time and place. So if we have a critical event on or hardcore big project that I need to work on, sure, I will happily chip in, but that's not what I'm going to do every day. And so I had a really open conversation with this person. This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm not willing to do. Are you happy with that? Because if you're not happy with that, I want you to be honest, and I got
it now.
Yeah. And they were like, nope, I get that. I respect it. And what happened is when I got into the role, because I start work, so I naturally start work at about 7:30. Mm-hmm. So I try and leave at 4:30 because my brain is like fuzzy. And so that person knew that was my setup, and so would not bother me after I left. Not a call, nothing. Yet the person before me who didn't set any boundaries was working 13-hour days to do the same job. Now, I tell that story because it was a really big turning point for my sort of confidence in having boundary conversations. Yep. Since that role, I've taken other roles, and I've really made sure to keep those boundary conversations super clear when a new executive starts with me or I start with them, because it is so important to the success of the role. So I share that, but I share it also to show the opposite. With no boundaries, in the same role that someone else is doing, you can burn out rapidly.
Very quickly.
Rapidly.
The thing that is really challenging, I think, when you have, because a lot of times we are partnering with people that are high-powered and they're crushing it and they're doing all the things and they have no boundaries themselves. Also, a lot of times if they're running the business, like business happens 24/7 and all of those things. But I love the idea of just saying, kind of internally looking and saying, what are my boundaries? And then also being able to communicate those in a way that is direct but clear. And then, because it's not always the boundary that is, like, setting the boundary is not always as hard as holding the line. Holding the line of that boundary is really difficult, because then you can have very challenging conversations. And what does that actually look like? So any thoughts on your end? Like, what are some of the best ways that you know to, let's just say, now I know people don't do this to you, but you ask me for an agenda and I don't give it to you. Like, what kind of a boundary do you hold?
People do it to me all the time. All the time. So my boss has 3 regular meetings that I do call for agenda items. And one of them is with all of her direct reports. She's got 24 direct reports. And there are often times where people will send me the agenda items past the date that I've given, and they get one chance, and then after that, it's not added. So it does not go onto the agenda. The only exception to that rule is whether or not my boss feels like it is a critical item that has to be discussed in that exact meeting. So what will happen, it'll come through late. I'll walk in and say, I've just received this. I'm not accepting it. Are you happy for me to go back and say, you've missed the deadline, it's on the next meeting? I do that because there is some stuff that I'm not fully across in the business. And so I just do a quick touch base with her, and then she'll go, absolutely. And to be fair, in all the times that it's happened, I think she said, no, it has to go on maybe twice, 2 or 3 times. But I do things like that. So even like out of hours work, right? I understand where I sit in my office at work. I have executive assistants that work within our office as well. And because I'm the most senior in that structure, I'm never going to email them out of hours.
Yeah.
I may work out of hours because I feel that I just want to get on top of something quickly.
Yeah.
But I will never send an email to them out of hours. So what I will do is I will schedule send the email to go at 8:30 the next morning. If someone texts me about something that isn't urgent at 6:30 p.m., I'm not texting back.
You choose when to respond.
Correct. I will text back the next morning. And I'll just say, oh, sorry, only just saw this, blah, blah, blah. And this is something that's really critical. You are the protector of your time. You're the protector of your sort of well-being, right? And if you are not looking out for yourself, no one else is going to look out for you.
No one is, yes.
And that goes, and the harsh reality, and this is not a horrible thing. My husband looks after my well-being all the time, but it is not his responsibility. So we are the only people that are responsible for our well-being. So if you are letting people into your time and into your mental space at hours that don't suit you, you have to stop that. And you stop it by not responding.
And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting too. Like, if you can't fire me, I'm not responding.
Yeah.
Really not. Now, people who are we have a couple of people that are watching that are in my membership group, and they could probably finish the sentence because I say this literally all of the time. But you cannot like other people more than you love yourself. Period. And every time you are saying, because we're also very conditioned in this role to be like, oh, whatever you need, and I'm happy to help. I'm really actually not always happy to help. And I'm really sometimes going head down. And every time I'm saying yes to you, and even if you go back to the agenda thing for a moment, when I became really, and I think we talked about this when I came into when I was telling everybody about Fred, the alligator. But when I became hardcore with my meetings, exactly the same, going, hey, listen, if you don't send it in, I'm not going to look like the idiot 2 seconds before the meeting scrambling to add your information because you didn't send it on time. And there was always this expectation. Of course, I'm happy to help. And when we use that kind of phrasing, I think that we have to be very careful, because then we really get into that, like, that work wife and the office mom mentality. And we're always there's never a line to hold with anyone that just says, like, here's the expectation. I'm happy to help let's work together to figure out how we don't keep letting this happen, but you're not going to keep doing this and then keep showing up. Because at the end of the day, if something happens like that, they're looking at Nick and going, Nick, why is our staff meeting horrible? It
Mhm.
feels like you're always behind and nothing is ever ready. Nobody cares about, Sam that sent to you 2 seconds before, but they're going to care that Nick owns it. Okay, so Michelle mentioned about Fred. Do you guys want to hear about Fred?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard about Fred, but I'm keen.
Yes. Okay.
I'm all in.
So
Yeah.
for those of you that are like, what is Fred? Okay, so I had this executive business partner, and he just was really like, we have to lock down our staff meetings. We have to be more intentional. They're always running over all of the things. Super great, fun, exciting personality. So he was not boring. So I got a Fred, the walking alligator. He was green and wonderful. I'll have to see if I can find a picture of him. I have since let him go to the grandchildren. And so he was literally a walking alligator who was like this big. And so when somebody was coming in to present to the ELT, I would let them know, hey, look, this is how I process the session. This is when I expect the pre-reads. And then I also walk them through how I facilitate the meeting. And part of that would be like, hey, when you're getting close to your time, I'm going to wave my hand. When you're at time, that's your, to wrap it up. When you're at time, I am going to lift up Fred the alligator. And if you don't wrap it up, I will turn Fred on. And they're like, okay. Until I actually have to turn Fred on and he's walking down the middle of the table while they're trying to talk. And everybody's like, what is happening? There's a walking animal on the table. And that was just how we approached it in a really fun, but hey guys, I'm not kidding when I say shut it down, actually shut it down. So I know everybody's like, I cannot believe you did that, Melissa. But the point is that there was a boundary that I had communicated with people in multiple different ways. And at some point, people have to know that you're not kidding. And maybe you don't turn on Fred the alligator. Maybe there's just a conversation that you have afterwards that says, hey, listen, and I love that you go to your executive business partner and you say, are you happy for me not to add this? And the other thing that's interesting about that too is because then she can look at them and go, hey, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not Nick going, well, what happened, Nick? It's like to the other person, why wasn't it done? You weren't ready. I like it.
It's also really important because I think sometimes we shy away from telling our executives what is actually happening. I think there is a way of doing it in a really constructive, respectful, professional way. And I think we view yes. Oh
yes,
my God.
I will find it and I will post the link of Fred.
Please. Oh my goodness. But there is a respectful way of having those conversations, right? So what that conversation with my executive does is tells her what my boundaries are around this meeting.
Yes.
So what am I willing to accept? And it's also letting her know who are my problem people. So who are the people that and there can be repeat offenders. Also, I keep seeing Fred. Also, in terms of little things around boundaries, there's in our meetings, we have a big boardroom and like every company. And oh my God, actually on that, sorry, my brain just disappeared. I shared on Instagram last night a meme, I think it was from Exec Angels or someone, about when you book the boardroom and the meeting.
Oh my God, that was hilarious.
And it's the video of the Velociraptor from Jurassic Park sniffing up against the glass. That is me. I will give them until 1 minute past the time and then I knock, open and walk in. Anyway, so separate to that, when people are coming to present, so external people are presenting to our meeting, they know, because I write it really clearly, I either need your presentation at least 3 hours before the meeting. If you do not send it to me by this time, you must bring your own adapter and share your own screen. I will not be doing it for you.
Yep.
Now, that is a boundary that I discussed with my boss. She's aware of it. And so what happens, there are a ton of people that try and push that rule. So they will come in and go, oh, Nick, I've just emailed you the presentation, as they sit down in the meeting, to which I will go, have you got your adapter? Because you'll need to plug your laptop in. And then what then happens is then you feel like the people around me go, And then, but I'm very nice about it. And then they will often say no. And I'm like, I'm really sorry, you'll have to send the slides after. Now, the reason why I do that is so that I'm not fumbling around a meeting room in a panic state trying to look for an adapter or plug something in or get something up on the screen. Because I've got attendees that are around the world on Zoom, plus a whole bunch of people in the office. I'm not giving them a bad experience. No. So if you don't have the courtesy to get me your stuff early, it's really not my problem. But I do it in a really nice and professional way. So people, I don't think, ever feel like I'm coming for their throat. But I am. But it's because it's respectful, right? I would never do it to someone else's meeting where I would rock up at the last minute. So being clear about your boundaries, being professional, it just helps you. And by other people knowing your boundaries, they know what they can and can't do.
Yeah.
So none of our meeting members would ever do what those people do with the presentations, ever.
Well, you know what is interesting? Well, people would hate me because I put a really hard boundary that if the deck was not to me 24 hours in advance, you were automatically off the agenda. Like you were canceled from the agenda. And this was a conversation that I had with my executive. And this was how hard he's like, I want them ran tight and I want you to run them. But also you have to be responsible for the outcome. So I was 100% like, oh, no. And, it's like, to your point, you can give someone a pass and go like, hey, if this is your first time, let's work it out. But past that, what is the conversation that you have? But the one thing that I think is really important is that if you're framing all of this together, you're really going, look, I've spent the time doing your hour of power. You've thought really through the work that you have to do. You're being very proactive. You're getting ahead of that wave. You're reducing the chaos. And then you're just sort of like setting those expectations with kindness. I know we talked about this in your group, but and again, my members probably hear me say this all the time, but like setting boundaries is kindness. When you don't, I think it just causes so much ambiguity. So do you have any thoughts on like, what does that do for other people? Have you ever heard, let's just say around meeting management, have you ever heard people go like, thank you for letting me know the expectation for these meetings?
Totally. I think what setting boundaries does, so yes, it's incredibly kind to yourself, but it's also really kind to others. Yeah. So by removing the gray area, I mean, there's enough gray, right? In our world, in our jobs. Like, if we can remove an aspect of it, get rid of it. Because all it does is it makes everyone calmer. And so I've definitely had people say, thank you. I really like how you run this. I've had people say, can you talk to my committee secretary of this, of how you do certain things, which I'm very happy to do. The reality is, everything that I do, I think, okay, how will that make my boss look?
Yeah.
How will that make our office look? I also have a general rule for myself, which is I want people to be able to say, Nick is great, full stop. Right?
Yeah.
Right? I never want someone to be able to go, Nick is good, but I'd never want the but.
Yeah.
Right? Ever. And it's not about being perfect, because perfection doesn't exist. I'm absolutely not perfect. But what lays after that but is usually trapped in being not authentic. It's trapped in people pleasing. It's trapped in chaos, in all of that stuff that kind of being reactive. So all of that stuff that kind of ends up enveloping us in these roles. So you want to get rid of those sections, so that even though if you make a mistake, or you may be slightly harsh in setting a boundary sometimes, which is sometimes me, people still understand my purpose, why I'm doing it, that my intention is good, and that the whole reason is about making sure that us as a university operate seamlessly, and that we bring everything together, and that people are working harmoniously, and all of that. But really, to come back to your point, Melissa, that boundaries are rooted in kindness. Like, as long as you are being professional in setting your boundaries. So as long as and what I mean by that is, like, you're not going to walk into a room and go, I refuse to do this.
Yes.
Right? That's
yes.
not, that's, you know, no. that's not what we're going to do. How I do it, and I'll sort of say it now just quickly, but I will walk in if I'm setting a boundary and say, in order for me to do this, this is what I require. Or in order for me, so for example, for those meetings, when I have a conversation around boundaries with my boss for it, in order for me to make sure this runs really smoothly, these are my expectations. Full stop.
Full stop.
That's it. So there's a, why am I doing it? So the purpose, which is obviously got the benefit in there, and then this is what I'm going to do. That is a professional way of saying it.
And I think that there is sort of this expectation that, you know, once you set the boundary, you can certainly set it with being thoughtful and being kind. And again, you know, you can't like other people more than you love yourself. But while doing that, I think that one of the things that is really impactful is if you think about the tools that most executives are being ran by are the tools that we own. So they're running by their calendar. And the statistics that have came out since COVID and how many more meetings there are since COVID, it is ginormous. I think it was like 80% increase in meetings. People are drowning, literally drowning. And from a coaching perspective, when I go into companies and I'm working with their executive assistant team, or if I'm working with their executive ops team, this is the thing that we talk about all the time. And executives are literally desperately, somebody fix this for me. I don't know how to fix it. We're just meeting just to meet. Nobody knows what to expect. And this is really an area that I think that administrative professionals can really go crush it and shine and take a burden and a load off if you're willing to step up and be the person to help everybody kind of think that through. So, okay, guys. So before, I want to give us time for Q&A. So if you guys have questions for Nick, please throw them into the chat.
There is one. And there is one from Maggie that I actually do want to answer.
Yeah.
And when I say I do want to answer all questions. I'm an open book.
We know what you meant, Nick.
Yeah. So that question is really quite fascinating. The one thing that I will say, covering gaps and all of that stuff, a lot of it is rooted in the relationship and communication. So if your boss is neurodivergent or not, really doesn't, as in it does matter, because obviously there's different ways that they work, but in how you attack it, it's the same. So you need to understand how they work, understand the quirks of their brain. How does it work? When does it work best? What are the things that they get tripped up on? And then break down the barriers of the stuff that they get tripped up on, right? Yeah. So if you know that your boss is neurodivergent and you know where they fall in that group, research how it impacts work. There is lots of stuff that you can actually jump online and read. Google Scholar is fantastic. If you just type in neurodivergent working office setting, there will be a research study on how someone that is a particular type of neurodivergent will work in an office setting. So look at stuff like that. It is really, really key. So research, understand how their brain works, then you can tackle the gaps because you know how to tackle the gaps because you know what's tripping you up. That's the key thing.
One time I supported this executive, and when I went in, everybody was like 100%, he's going to talk to you for 5 minutes, super brilliant person, but felt like that the conversation in his head was much more interesting than the conversation he was going to have with anyone else. And, you know, it was fine. It was wonderful. But the challenge that he was having is that he was spending a very large majority around people, and he was neurodivergent. And he was just like, I cannot get a break to even think about it. And so he wasn't doing what he needed to do. He wasn't showing up. It was a real challenge. And I immediately switched that. And I was like, you will have calls, no calls after noon. And like, this is the amount of time that you have to meet. We're going to have to be really intentional with that. And it changed everything for him. So I love it. I love that exact piece of going, understand how they work. What are the challenges? What are the gaps? Go fix that and then reassess. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Katie has a question. Let's ask Katie's question. So what does it look like to set up expectations with someone who supports your executive's peer and they simply have a different way of doing things?
Yeah, so depending on your company, depending on the structure, depending on the hierarchy, depending on all of that stuff, there is a lot of things that it can influence how this works. If it is something that so if you are a peer and it's hierarchically on the same line, it goes back to so you can set an expectation, but you can't make people do it, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you're clear, it's that whole you can lead a horse to water but can't make it drink. Like when it comes to agendas, right, and setting agendas. So my current boss, she kind of wants them not too fast. My previous boss did. So I implemented a process and I sent it out, and there were some people that were her peers that I requested agendas from. They never came. I would just give her the heads up. Hey, the agenda was sent. They don't seem to have any items. Nothing came back. Full stop. Then it's up to them to have that discussion with each other. So if your boss has an expectation of agendas and the other boss, so that their peer doesn't want to do an agenda, they need to figure out a way in the middle to work, especially if they're having regular meetings or they're on a project together or whatnot. But in short, you can set the expectation and you can set the boundary, but you can't make someone else do it. So this isn't, expectations and boundary setting isn't about forcing people into working how you want to work. It's about them understanding how you want to work to get the best outcome. And if they don't want to follow it, that's their own problem.
I think it's an interesting piece when you're talking about peer-to-peer, because to your point, you can't force people to do. Now, one of the things that I can say is when you're at the highest level of an organization, you can force down, if you want to say it this way, this is how we run meetings at this organization. This is the base level of standard expectations, which is something that a lot of organizations never do. But in my mind, it is one of the most critical things to do, because people are literally just meeting just to meet, and we're spending so much time. So just kind of even going, this is the expectation of how we are going, like the baseline of meetings will have agendas. You know, we're going to have expected outcomes. We're going to have notes that are in action items or whatever that looks like for you guys. And just having a level set within, you know, maybe you partner with HR or you partner with different stakeholders in the organization that says, this is a new initiative. Pull the data that's coming out that says people are literally burning out because of meetings. They're in meetings 9 and 10 hours a day, and then they're going home and working and not seeing their families. So it is, I think that this is an opportunity for administrative professionals to take a lead, again, because it's the tool that we own. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you literally all day about hashtag all of these things. But okay, so tell us, where can everybody find you? What are you doing next? Tell us all the things so that they can go follow you and love you as much as we all do.
You are very kind. Yes, this could definitely go for another 2 hours. So you can find me on Instagram is the main one. I've seen a couple of people come through. Thank you. But that is where I'm most active. So I share literally my entire sort of being on there. I talk a lot about mental health and mental well-being on there, and I talk about my life experiences and whatnot. It's a very open space, and it's I hope a nice safe community for people to join. And then so that's just at Nick Ginsburg, nice and easy. And then LinkedIn is the other place, but you can find all of those on my website, nickginsburg.com. And you can follow me on there. But I would love for anyone that jumps on and connects, reach out, send me a message. I'd love to chat. I'm also very happy to chat to anyone offline about anything that we've spoken about on this call. I understand that in settings like this, it can be hard to raise a question, especially when it comes to your office and who you're supporting, because there can be, you don't know who's watching. So if you wanted to chat to me privately, please reach out. I'm very happy to jump on a Zoom call.
Thank you guys so much. You guys are all amazing. So let's take a second and everybody gives Nick some love in the chat. Thank you, Nick, so much. I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to do this. You are amazing, and I'm so glad everybody got to get to know you. So thanks, everyone. Big hugs, and we'll see you on the next live. Bye, y'all.
Thanks. Bye.